Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's we're a small but important group of people that are here today. So this is really going to be like the soft launch of the Net Zero Interdisciplinary Seminar Series. So for those people that don't know me, I'm Chris Frost. I'm the Vice Dean for Research in the faculty, and I'm a chemist by background, so Professor of Chemistry as well. So I do spend some time on the Guy's campus as well. So I guess what I'm going to do today is launch this series. I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of how the Net Zero Centre sits within the faculty strategy, how it fits perhaps with the national strategy, and how these seminars might work going forward. So apologies, you won't have a real seminar today in terms of hearing about lots of research and generating ideas, but it's a chance to discuss how they might work, and I'll give an idea of my research as well, and some questions, and particularly around the potential physical sciences interface with net zero. Right, so is it on the keyboard? Choose the,
If you just do it. Is it not working? It was working before.
Apologies for a moment while I sort out the IT. Is it on the click?
No, it should be. Is that not working? Oh, there you go.
Which one is it? Oh,
The arrow.
oh, it's now woken up. Okay. It's just having its afternoon now. Okay, so obviously I don't have to give too much introduction to our faculty, the faculty of NMES, but of course it's important to realise that Net Zero reaches out across the different college. But one thing I wanted to emphasise is really that NMES has really grown significantly over the last 2 or 3 years, and I think the important thing to acknowledge is that what we've seen is a switch really from a very strong education economy to taking a more focus on the research economy, and I think we've seen this now with certainly a growth in the number of academic staff. With the launch of engineering, the growth of informatics, we've seen an increase in the number of staff. The number of postdocs is starting to increase coming forwards, and we have great professional service team support as well. And this is starting now to reflect in our research income. So I think at all-time high levels for the faculty, where we had applications over 115 million in 2022, and this translated into about 22 million pounds of awards. And so this is really starting to show that we are on a trajectory as a faculty to become important in terms of our research activity across the college as well. And this lies at the centre of the faculty strategy in a number of ways. So there is a number of things that have been ongoing now for the last few years when Bashir took over as Dean, and now carried on with Mark as the interim Dean. And I guess what I wanted to point out by this is that one of the central focus of this in terms of the research strategy was setting up these interdisciplinary research centres, of which Net Zero is a flagship centre for the faculty going forward. And you can see that the activities of Net Zero would also be important in other things as well. So you'll be aware of the KISS project as well, the King's Inspired Science, which is to try and grow separately the physical science like maths, physics and chemistry. But importantly, the Net Zero Interdisciplinary Research Centre is a central focus of KISS as well, because interdisciplinary research obviously involves all the disciplines in the faculty, and whether they sit in whether you can be doing chemistry in various departments or physics in various departments as well, so all very relevant to the activities of the centre. It's important as well that, again, one of the things that's happened recently is setting up this enterprise and engagement team, and this is really to try and build strong links to industry. I think we know now that as we switch from small project research grants to larger hub bids, program grants, bigger programs, it's really important to get that industrial engagement as well. So having a team to help support that is important at the faculty, and of course this is really relevant to the Net Zero Centre as well, as are strategic partnerships and hopefully a vibrant postgrad community as well in all areas. So it's just really just to highlight that Net Zero does sit at the centre of, I think, of our faculty strategy going forward. So King's College London Net Zero Centre obviously launched earlier this year, and it was a fantastic event. I'm sure you were all there, and you can see that the idea is creating this centre of excellence that engages both science and technology to address the challenges around net zero, develop new technologies and reduce carbon emissions. If you look at it, it has the Net Zero Centre is at the centre of a number of activities to join up. So certainly the technology innovations that can come from you as academics and researchers, but also linking this to policy makers as well, because you can have the best technical solutions, but unless you've engaged with policy makers to make them a reality, they're unlikely to progress to the levels that we need to. And also linking up the industry and innovation sectors and the financial sectors as well. So it's important, the interconnectedness of all these things are going to be important for a successful centre, and this has really been well thought through, I think, in the case of net zero. And in fact, I can't remember the exact quote from Chris Skidmore, but at the launch event, but he said he'd never seen a specific net zero centre at a higher education institute like this one before. I think it was true. That was good press to get, I think. Yeah. And as he was launching the Mission Zero paper, it was a good thing for him to be saying everywhere. And again, as you'd be well aware, that the centre is going to focus on these priority areas, which we think that a lot of the research around the faculty and the college will fit into. So whether it's the decarbonisation agenda for industry and business, sustainable low carbon manufacturing, and then also looking at equity and sustainability, resource allocation, and then resilience in our cities and environments as well. So this allows us to bring in a lot of other disciplines into the centre and have these joined up activities. So far so good. It's on track, I think. The centre's launched, the website's launched, we're starting to grow activities. So the idea here is that we are launching this the interdisciplinary seminar series, which we hope will become an integral part of the activities of the centre. So the idea behind it is that we use this as a platform, really. It can be quite informal sometimes, it might be a bit more formal, but to foster new collaborations, new ideas, certainly to develop interdisciplinary research projects, and as a way of sharing our knowledge of different projects that are going on in our different groups. And importantly, to really discuss emerging opportunities that will benefit from the strength of the centre, which is in these interdisciplinary collaborations. And I guess we don't know always what the format of these will be. So today is, I'm just talking about the launch of how this may run. It could run in something like this, where we might have 15-20 minutes talk on research, followed by a question. It could be people presenting a research idea, or a couple of people presenting research ideas. So it could be quite informal. It could be that you bring in someone from outside, from industry, to indicate a challenge. There could be lots of ways that this might work, but I think possibly the engagement of people is going to be the central thing that will be important, to keep people coming back here, more than just for the cream scones that we're going to get at the end of this, but to actually engage in the discussions and to try and get excitement around new ideas and new themes. Now, some of the time this might be focused on a funding opportunity. Hopefully, it will be more addressing the challenges as well. I think we should be well informed about funding opportunities, as there's a link on the website which shows you new things as they're coming up, and we're already aware of the centre being a central focus for some of the larger bids that are going in at the moment of opportunities. So I think the format of this is still going to be open. It'll be a learning experience as you go through different types of activities, what works, what doesn't work, whether it's better in person, whether it's better online, whether you need smaller groups or bigger groups. That will sort itself out, I think, as we go along. So I understand that the plan will be going forward to try and have one of these a month. So we'll have one next month in the week of July the 10th. Then there'll be the gap for the summer of September and August and September, and then to start them again in October. Is that right? Or start in September?
Yeah,
We don't know yet. No. But to start them off as a regular monthly occurrence and advertised on the website, so you kind of have an idea of what the themes might be or whatever. And also I think the idea is that you're going to allow people to suggest ideas or be able to volunteer to give seminars as well. So by emailing the centre inbox.
Yep, net zero at KCL.ac.uk.
Okay, so I think this is going to be a really useful thing to be doing. So the Net Zero Centre is obviously part of a big environment at King's. There are different centres. You'll be aware that that King's has started an initiative around climate and sustainability quite recently. So the launch of this initiative with an idea of accelerating climate research, education and actions across King's in all different ways. Now the idea that this will also become an institute for climate and sustainability, I think, at some stage. Has that happened yet, or is it about to?
I think
It's still an idea.
It's in the planning. It's happening,
yeah.
But not officially launched.
Yeah, so this will be a reasonably well-funded institute at the college level to try and bring together a lot of the research and activities that are going on at faculties. And I think the key message here is that the net zero will be an important component of that institute. Not necessarily separate, doing different things, but it will be a hub and spoke model. So it'll have representation on the board of that institute, and it will be directly involved in it in many different ways. So what's been happening with the King's Climate and Sustainability Initiative is they initially got some funding to get up and going, to get visibility across King's. So you'll be aware that they have this seed fund which offers opportunities for staff. You may not be aware, I saw some puzzled faces there, but they have this seed fund which offers some kind of seed support to offer staff the opportunity to develop new research, new connections, building up towards critical mass for larger applications. So they'd already had round one. So I think they've got about 2 million available in this fund. They had the first round about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and I think there was one success from the centre in securing funds from that. I think that there was a budget of about 200,000 for that first call. It was largely focused on the smaller awards here, which were 15 to 50,000 on focused developments and developing, new partnerships, getting ready to go forward. Now I understand the second round has just been launched and advertised, and the deadline to submit ideas or applications is going to be September. So you've got all summer to think about it, to procrastinate, and then at the beginning of September start to write something. And from what I understand, that there'll be a 500,000 budget for this one, and there might be a leaning towards the larger awards as well. So looking at groupings that have got some ideas and working towards a well-defined opportunity. And I was on the panel of the first one, and I think the message there was what they did want to see is a real really putting up an idea of where you're going to go to get your next level of funding. So it's a seed fund to try and go towards a research award. It's not just to fund a little research project. It's really to develop the relationships or critical mass or maybe some key results or whatever you need to go for that bigger award. So I thought this would be a good time to advertise this opportunity if you haven't already seen it. I'm sure it'll be featuring on the website soon if it's not already. Okay, that's not fantastic, is it, in terms of visibility? But what I wanted to try here is to just focus down a little bit on how net zero fits into the national priorities from the Funding Council, particularly EPSRC and UKRI. So we know that in terms of EPSRC, engineering net zero is a key mission-inspired research program. So they've held workshops, they've had launch days of this program, which I think were attended by some of the people here. And it forms part of the mission-inspired research along with AI, transforming healthcare and quantum technologies. So it's a really important ecosystem going forward for engineering and physical sciences. And of course, the Science and Technology Framework have also released details about core technologies as well. So to accompany things like quantum technology, you've also got engineering, biology and semiconductor work as well, which feed into these kind of core technologies which I feel are important for the economy and the science and engineering in the UK at the moment. So what I was going to do really is just to focus a little bit of discussion on the physical sciences interface with net zero, because as a chemist by background, I wanted to talk about how engineering is really important, but also physical sciences can play a contribution in some of this, and I wanted to lay out potentially some of the challenges that there might be there where physical sciences can engage within the Net Zero Centre and within some of the challenges and opportunities that lie from the Funding Council. So, in terms of where EPSRC sits, obviously engineering is crucial to this, but engaging some of the science as well will enable us to meet these targets. So some of the things that came out in recent presentation from UKRI and EPSRC is this idea of a net zero chemicals sector, which is ambitious, but if we look at the potential outcomes of what would like to be achieved by this can set you thinking about, well, what technologies do we need to be able to be focusing on, and what capabilities do we need to be able to address these challenges? And they're quite interesting ones, so ones that you will have seen before, and they, a lot of these are not new. So creating sustainable value from new carbon feedstocks is one thing. Discovering new chemistry. So when you think about how chemistry developed over the century, a lot of it has really been focused on petrochemical starting materials. If you look at how we teach chemistry as a subject, we start off by teaching them about aromatic chemistry and alkenes, and basically because all our raw materials come from petrochemicals. So from an education perspective, that's interesting. But we need new technologies, new chemistries, and new materials to be able to contribute towards net zero. So I think there's also an education element here where we hope that one day in 10, 15, 20 years' time that we're teaching chemistry completely different. We're starting from sugar chemistry, and we're starting from renewable feedstocks and teaching them the basic chemistries around that before we worry about the petrochemicals. So new chemistries is going to be important. Obviously, there's no point developing new chemistries that only work on 100 milligrams, because that's not really very good, and that's something which I think synthetic chemists often forget when they're putting forward these fantastic ideas of what they're going to be able to do. It's, if that's ever going to be useful, even at the drug scale, even making tens of kilos, where are your starting materials coming from? What's the supply chain? Is it really sustainable? So I think that connection between the actual new chemistry and the scale-up is important, and focusing on the supply chain. And also this concept as well of designing in terms with recyclability in mind, I think is a key thing. So there are important challenges to address of what can we do with what we need to work with at the moment in terms of plastics and other polymers and other materials. But if we were to be given a blank piece of paper, we probably wouldn't start there now if we wanted to get towards net zero. We'd be starting with, well, can we design our feedstocks, can we design our materials to be recyclable and to have a safe end of life? So these are the type of capabilities that we would like to have. In terms of inputs, I think there's a big role for digital and AI and machine learning in this. As we know, this is now pervasive in all of science and technology now. And so it's almost routine, but it still has to be part of the landscape in terms of the inputs we need to be able to enable our new chemistries going forward. And really, these are just some of the ideas of potential enabling areas that could be used to work towards this. We know that engineering biology is a big core technology going forward. So taking the principles of engineering and trying to apply it to biological systems and work in all ways. Biomanufacturing and carbon capture and use is also really important as well. And thinking about the digital, there's new ideas and innovation around digital twinning and being able to get that idea of digital twins for new processes, manufacturing, and certainly for recycling and end of life is going to be really useful going forward as well. So I think what I was wanting to illustrate there is that there's potential input from all different disciplines here, from engineering, chemistry, biology, and computer science. So a little bit about myself. So, in some ways, some of these seminars might be based on people giving research. So I thought I'd give a little flavour of my historic research. Now I seem to spend a lot of time in meetings and interviews and other things. But once upon a time, I did research and really enjoyed it. So about 15 years ago, one of the focuses of my research was on this new concepts in catalysis. And really one of the things I was working on was new strategies for recycling catalysts. And so we had some ideas of how we wanted to use new catalysis for carbon-carbon bond formation. And we prepared a range of palladium complexes which were supported on silica, then encapsulated with polymers to try and prevent leaching so that they could be recycled and used multiple times. And that was reasonably successful on a small scale. Difficult to scale up some of these things. We found that the activity of them was substantially down on homogeneous catalysis, which would limit some things, but the leaching was low. We also made it attached it to magnetic nanoparticles so that you could recover it magnetically and hold it in a flow reactor, which I was always impressed by. When we had a glass flow reactor, you could see your catalyst suspended in flow if you got it right to do some of this catalysis. So that merged into one of my other interests, which was developing chemistries that were new chemistries that were amenable to flow processes, because I think that was something again which, from the chemical sector perspective, that people didn't often talk to each other about. Research chemists in labs were focused on small tubes and flasks, and then as soon as we needed scaling up in industry, it was going into flow reactors or a batch. So you have to think differently. So working about how we could use optimized catalysis for use in flow was something I was interested in for a few years with chemical engineering colleagues. About 5 years ago, I started working in another area which I was calling on, which was called on switch-on catalysis, and I was interested in being able to make catalysts that were inert until you stimulated them to be active. And so this was kind of trying mimicking biological systems, but with materials, with metal complexes and appropriate ligands and things like that. And so we managed to do this, and one of the applications that we had for this was actually in sensing in an ELISA assay. So this is where you have an enzyme which is attached to an antibody which captures an analyte. And normally the enzyme, you do this, and normally the enzyme processes some kind of visualization agent, typically UV active or a colorimetric, and the enzyme will oxidize it or do something to it to change its color or to change its fluorescence. So the presence of the target analyte could be seen by by the change that the enzyme brings around. So our idea was simply, could we use the enzyme to turn on a catalytic process, and then we would get amplification of this, so we could start to detect very, very low levels of analyte. So we found a way of basically, it seems counterintuitive, but we had to work very hard to turn our catalyst off. So, you know, we were using some palladium and rhodium catalysts, and they wanted to do reactions. So we designed ligands that essentially switched them off by basically saturating them with coordination, so they didn't have any active sites free. And then we worked out a way of removing some of the ligands by an enzyme catalyzed process. So then it became active again. And this was really nice. So we could turn different catalysts on in a cascade. So, and that worked, and we patented that, but no one actually bought up. No one found it very useful in terms of that application, but maybe it will one day. The other thing I've been doing more recently is looking at catalysis in terms of protein modification, so particularly thiols in proteins. So we've devised some chemistry based on palladium complexes and palladium catalysis, where we can modify surface cysteines on proteins, and so we can decorate them with sugars or different things that we want to do. And this is work that is just ongoing at the minute, so we've only just got our first results in it, but we think this could be a way of potentially altering the properties of biopolymers, tuning them with different things so that we may be able to change their mechanism of action or interact with other proteins in terms of signaling or turn-on processes. So there's things that we're doing around that. So that's the kind of things that I'm doing. So I was going to finish by just posing a couple of questions which we could take forward in discussion, or it could be one of those things that we think about, and if anyone has any bright ideas of developing ideas in this area. So one of the things I'm always inspired by is how we can take inspiration from biology as well. You know, in our bodies we build up complex polymers at room temperature, in water, in aqueous challenging environments. So basically trying to start to think about what are those feedstocks that we might be able to start to use very mild conditions to generate new useful polymers with the right properties, or thinking about my interest in catalytic modification of polymers. Could we generate some simple polymers that are recyclable and then modify them for purpose by selective functionalization? Is an idea. There's always I've been in so many meetings where people are looking at new materials to generate renewable energy for solar panels. Obviously that's a big focus of materials chemistry at the moment, and something which is improving slowly, and I'm sure one day it is going to reach a tipping point at some point where the efficiency of solar panels gets to the level of where it becomes truly game changing. Capturing waste energy to improve efficiency, an engineering challenge for everybody, I think, and an ongoing thing that could be of useful for people that have ideas. I know people work on these ideas as well in the faculty. Again, I mentioned this before, but looking back, start to design in sustainability from the outset is something I think we could focus on before. Rather than dealing with our problems that we've got today, go back to the drawing board and start to think about monomers and manufacturing processes that have sustainability tied in. New materials is always going to be at the centre of this, in my view, for all these kinds of processes. And again, I'm trying to identify what are the chemical and biological techniques, processes that we might need to aid in recycling. What do we need to change to make it more useful? So those are a few questions. This could be a format for how these seminars work in future. It could be that someone presents their research idea, proposal, asks a question for input. I'm going to kind of leave it open at this stage whether people want to answer some of those questions, discuss, or whether they just want to have a cake and a cup of tea and a chat and think about this. But I'm done. Do you want to have any questions or comments on this point?
Ask you a question. So you mentioned the example earlier about plastics, and that got me interested in benign, right? So how do we define environmentally benign? So and when you scale it, so when you're going from something at lab scale to large scale, maybe the process changes a bit. So how do we contain it into something that can be scalable and that stays benign?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I have the answer to that. Open for discussion. What is truly benign in terms of materials, recycling, end of life? Is it something that goes back to, is it something that can be genuinely recycled efficiently if captured, or something that is decomposing or just going back to raw materials?
It's a really interesting question. And I think where they're moving ahead in that kind of definition is when it comes to biodiversity. So that's the other thing that kind of comes along with net zero, it often comes together. And now, many companies, it doesn't have to be neutral, it has to be positive, right? So it's going, so do we look at recyclability as something that isn't neutral, but that can also add, right, improve? Who knows? These are the big questions for us.
I was wondering from a practical side, because I mean today in the news it was about Drax power plant, right? That the fact that the process they have for Drax on the wood is that they use wood that is not being cut, but is leftovers from other industries, and now they were like looking at the fact that maybe actually they have to cut forest for it, and so what is net positive, what is net zero? It's interesting.
Yeah, and there's always other challenges, because in a lot of those types of power plants, we had a project where it was chicken, right? Because you've got a lot of that, but it's so caustic, right? That it causes other problems. So it's about that, as you mentioned earlier, that whole system approach, right? There's lots of unintended consequences that often you think, well, that's a really good solution. You can burn, waste wood from somewhere, but it's been treated with something. It's really quite interesting. I think that, we had a little project before I came here on synthetic biology, looking again at because it's polymers, right? I mean, and when we talk about proteins and polymer, I learned a lot, right? They're pretty much the same thing in a sense. And we were looking at nature-inspired new materials.
Yeah.
And we actually made a two-part adhesive through synthetic biology. And that was really quite a novel approach, because it was something that we hadn't done before. And I think there's a huge amount of scope for engineering applications, right?
Yeah.
Pulling through where you might not think chemistry, the gap is much narrower, as you say. Right? So there's a lot of application-driven things that we can turn to other physical science to get there.
I think there are opportunities there, because I think that access to biofeedstocks is improving, but often, so if you make a monomer that you can access easily through those resources, that the polymer itself doesn't give you the right properties that you need. You see this in polylactic acids and things like that. They have some use, but not they could be more universal. So being able to do that post-synthetic modification of them to alter the properties might be an interesting idea going forward.
And there was also something really interesting. I can't remember what it was. Self-stratifying types things too, because self-stratifying polymers can be really useful in many applications because it cuts out a lot of the manufacturing process. So they're kind of really interesting. Is it bringing those topics together, which is really fun.
I want to make maybe a different comment on the last point. So I was reading a couple of days ago about wind turbines recycling, because it seems that the wind turbine lifetime, usable lifetime is maybe 10 to 15 years, which is not a lot given the investment and the materials that go in. But what happens is that I saw a video where they destroy them when after that time they don't disassemble, they just difficult.
Really?
Because it's just easier for them just to make them to fall on the ground and collect the material rather than having somebody climbing. And I think the problem of the wind turbine now is a big problem in recycling and repurposing, because now there are a lot of them that needs to be replaced. And I thought that could be one of these hard to recycle materials.
That's a good point, yeah. I didn't realise they only lasted 10 to 15 years.
I think they can last longer, but the maintenance cost becomes too much. And then with the new technologies, with the same blade, you could get maybe twice the power if you put different blades or longer blades of different control. So for the developer, it's just much worse to replace them to get more power out rather than maintaining them.
Yeah.
So that's a huge amount of waste, because we know how many turbines are around. And I mean, I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that these are difficult materials to recycle. So that could be maybe an interdisciplinary project.
Yeah.
I think some of them, and you're absolutely right, it's the blades that are the real problem. And one company is now building them to make it easier to replace parts, right? So rather than having to take the whole thing, you can replace it. But it's always the blades that's the problem. And one company, if we all take up skiing, right, they were making skis, right, because they're carbon fiber. So the whole world, but global warming isn't going on, that's right. But I think it's not only about recycling, but it's about second life. Right? So it's not just we have to take it back, it's about what else can we use it for, like, think way outside the box.
Yeah.
And it might be really interesting, at least from the polymer point of view, I don't know that, but to be able to reshape them, right, to ensure that we're using it so that that we can reform them.
Yeah.
I think that there were some really good ideas proposed for future formats, definitely. So having industrial speakers maybe coming in, but I like, and I know some of our new members of South Eastern Engineering kind of want to just give a pitch about their research and these kinds of questions and know who's out there. And I think in this, as you said earlier, we're learning about each other in the net zero space. So I think that is really good to include.
You know, a more professional version of this, where actually someone pitches, you know, actually does 10 minutes on their research, where they are, what they would like to do, and then open up some questions,
Really
would work well, I think, because you could have 2 or 3 in a session, and you'd learn a lot. We'd all learn a lot and be able to contribute. It's just getting the volunteers to do it, or maybe they will be queuing up.
I mean, your project on the seafront is really, really interesting.
Yeah, so we got one of the first round seafront climate sustainable climate seafront. I think we work with Geography International Development to look at how, I think they already developed some research about how to shift the melting glacier mountain in some kind of climate, kind of patch population, kind of thing, significantly affected by climate change. So I talked to people, so from, I think for us, like from an engineering perspective, to see that not only for water or climate adaptation, or how to use it for energy storage and water scarcity, so broader scope. So that would be interesting to I mean, that's also good opportunity for me actually to join the team to work on more such an interdisciplinary topic. So I think that's kind of how this affect us to form an idea and form a collaboration across the background.
And I guess, as you say, it's that real opportunity to think, as they say, outside the box, right? Because these in Nepal or wherever they would store, they would freeze water, right, for agriculture later. But that is also, frozen water is an energy storage, right? Because then you can melt it and then it's, in your work, right? You bring it. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great opportunity to actually to work with people with different skills and research experiences. So for example, I work with people like climate environment scientists, so they know more about how where the glacier is, how about the environment of the climate data set. So which is actually quite useful for us to understand where the energy storage, where water scarcity is. So that's how we can work together to actually make more, hopefully to make a bigger impact and to see how we can solve the real world problem.
So, and then also like the human side. So when the human geography part, when do people want to use the water? Does it coincide with when the energy would be available?
I think to speak that I have to actually have a question about this. So I think here we talk more about at least for this question, I feel like more about interdisciplinary between science and engineering. And also the other part would be, I think one of the seminars or events, I think are also there, for example, we talk about the offshore wind. It's about for social purpose, so that the vertical farm, how we can improve the biodiversity, in the offshore environment. I don't know, whether that's, where how is we can find the, way to, for example, to foster that direction, to combine, for example, probably cross not only within the science and engineering, but potentially with, other more broader aspect.
Yeah.
So I think climate sustainability fund has a long way with internally. But I think for you guys, I see for UKRI, I see there are kind of set opportunity for them with the hub or interdisciplinary pilot scheme. So I guess they're start to take away find a new kind of the scheme for more broader collaboration. But I'm not sure whether that's a new trend or just something probably some based on, or we can still go back to a more traditional within engineering or science kind of scope.
Yeah, so I think getting those speakers in or people to bring almost the different perspectives and different challenges in is as important as hearing what's going on within the faculty as well.